Chicago, 2011. A cop is murdered. Police and prosecutors swear they have the trigger man. He swears he didn't do it. How far will each side go to prove they're right?
Like it's just one bombshell after another, where you're like, what?
The story of a PlayStation, a brain-eating amoeba, and the relentless pursuit of justice. Off Duty, out now. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Howdy, howdy, ho, and welcome to Fantasy Fan Fellas. I'm Hayden, producer of the Fantasy Fangirls podcast and your resident lover of all things Sanderson.
And I'm Steven, your bookish internet goofball, but you can call me the Smash Daddy.
And we are currently deep diving Brandon Sanderson's fantasy epic, Mistborn. But here's the catch. Steven here has not read Mistborn before.
That's right, hey. So each week, you'll get my unfiltered, raw reactions to every single chapter.
And along the way, we'll do character deep dives, magic explainers, and Steven will even try to guess what's next. Spoiler alert, he'll be wrong.
Newsflash, I'm never wrong. Episodes come out every Wednesday, and you can find Fantasy Fan Fellas wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello and welcome back to the Psych Legal Pop Podcast. This is a podcast where we talk about popular culture through the lens of an attorney and a therapist. I'm Tess Brigham. I'm the therapist.
And I'm Brooke Brigham. I'm the attorney.
So today we are covering Get Gotti. This is a new 3-part documentary on Netflix. And I have to say, I thought I knew things about Gotti and mafia and crime in the 80s, but I really didn't. I had no idea that he was able to beat the rap 3 times. And then, it took a lot to get Gotti. And I thought this was really well done. The thing is that I'm wondering, what do you remember about Gotti and that time? Because I do remember vaguely hearing about the Teflon Don. Mm-hmm. I remember hearing about how, this person, but we grew up in California, mm-hmm. and he's very much a New York Post. Like, he was written about a lot more there. So he was covered nationally, but he wasn't covered as much as he was covered in New York.
Yeah, well, I mean, definitely John Gotti was part of the cultural zeitgeist of the 80s. Mm-hmm. Everyone knew who he was. And, I was looking online about, some reaction to this documentary, and in this Rolling Stone article, they called Gotti, they said he was the Trump of mobsters. And I felt like that really, because that was also the era of Trump.
Yes, big
in
Trump
1980s
era.
in New York. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of true. Like, he was, most mobsters, they wore sweatsuits, mm-hmm. and, think The Sopranos.
Yes.
Tracksuits. And, they're not real glamorous. Gotti, he was wearing these very, very expensive suits. They call them the Dapper Dawn.
Mm-hmm. $2,000 suits, which in the 80s is a lot of money.
Yeah. And, he was much more into the flashiness, and he really liked the attention. Mm-hmm. Just like Trump.
Yes.
And, he people liked him.
Yeah.
Look
very popular.
Look at all the people who showed up to cheer him on every time he would get acquitted.
Yes.
It was like, what is happening here?
Yes.
And also, too, this was the era of, all the movies, Goodfellas, mm-hmm. and Godfather and
Well, the other thing too is, and they talk about this in the documentary, is New York in the 80s. So our father took us to New York. It was 1987, mm-hmm. and I remember going there and being like, "This place is disgusting."
It really was very seedy.
I was just like, "Oh, I think we stayed in Times Square. It was so gross."
Yeah.
And just all of it seems so seedy. And so one thing, and they say this in the documentary about how, it was pretty much lawlessness. Mm-hmm. New York in the 70s and 80s the crime was up, mm-hmm. No one, people were being assaulted on the streets. Like, this was the Bernie Getz time. This was like a lot was happening. And it really felt like, and I can imagine if I lived in New York and I saw how I felt like maybe the police weren't protecting me, mm-hmm. and here's the Teflon Don who keeps getting it over on them, and I can understand how he became this hero to people, because people did not feel safe. And here was this guy who obviously you shouldn't be worshiping. You shouldn't be worshiping a stone cold killer. But at the same time, it was this, people almost got excited about the fact that he was beating them, you know? And
yeah, because the police weren't really well regarded. And yeah, and you know, I think there's something about, because look at how many movies and stuff we do have about the mob.
Yes.
There's, you know, it's romanticized by Hollywood, and they kind of ignore that, you know, it's a violent criminal organization. And, you know, I think also too, what appeals to people is, I think people secretly wish that they kind of fantasize about like being able to tell people to fuck off with no consequences.
Yeah.
You know, because that's what the gangsters can do. It's like they can do whatever they want.
yeah.
You know, and people are afraid of them. And I think people secretly kind of wish, God, I wish I could do that.
Well, you know what it is? It's sort of like in that world, in that culture, if you're wronged, you can get revenge. Like
Right.
that is so much of it. And I think that every single person, and there are people in my life that I would just love to just smack, you know, I mean, you would just kill to be able to just walk up to them and just give them a couple
punch
whacks
them.
and just
Yeah.
punch them a few times. I don't want to kill them.
Yeah.
But it's that freedom and that thing. If you wronged me, I'm going to take revenge on you. And I think that it is, you know, it is very glamorous. It's easy money, quote unquote. But, you know, you're making tons of money. You've got respect. People, you know, you can't step on don't step on my foot, you know, and all of that. But the flip side of it is that it's a, you know, it's a profession and a world where there's only two endings,
Right.
prison or death. And so I think that's the other part of it too. That's hard, is I think none of us want the consequences, but we want that feeling, that power. So, but I was going to say something else, but I can't remember now. It'll come to me.
Yeah.
So this all starts with, it all starts December 16th, 1985. Paul Castellano, who is the boss of the Gambino crime family, is murdered. He is murdered along with Tommy Gelati, his number two.
And Tommy Gelati, or I thought it was Bellotti.
Oh, Bellotti, I'm sorry. There's a lot of oddies, itties.
Yeah, he's the guy who the Joe Pesci character in Goodfellas is modeled after. That's supposed to be him.
And so it's pretty well known. They're gunned down in the street
In front of the Sparks Steakhouse.
and basically it's known, it's not really much of a secret, that John Gotti is behind it. And so quickly John Gotti rises up. He's now the head of the crime family. And so we meet a lot of various characters as we go through. We meet Anthony Rugagano Jr. He's a mobster as well. We meet George Gabriel. He's the FBI agent. There's lots of characters. But this is one thing. This is what I was going to say. My note. And it's something that this Anthony said, which is, you know, mobsters are not supposed to draw attention to themselves. You are not supposed to, quote unquote, whack somebody out in the middle of the street. It's supposed to be very secretive. And so I think that really the way in which they killed Paul Castellano and all of that, just how brazen he was from the first moment, and the fact that I'm going to put this out there to you.
Yeah.
So anyway.
And the guy, the federal prosecutor, the guy that kind of looked like Gary Delabate. What?
That's George. That's George Gabriel, the FBI agent, the main guy.
The main guy. Yeah. When I saw him back in the 80s, I was like, oh my God, Baba Booey. Like
Baba Booey, Baba Booey. Yeah. So then we go back to, they kind of give us the sort of what was going on beforehand. So in May of 1973, a mobster, James McBratney, in Staten Island, they find out that he's kidnapping Italian mobsters and holding them for ransom. And Gotti and two men, you know, they went and killed Bratney, and John was arrested for the first time, and then he got out.
What are you talking
No.
about?
Oh, what, am I lost my notes? No. Is this not what you have next?
I don't know. You always take much better notes than I do.
Oh, okay. Well, basically, I think he was arrested. He served a couple years, but that really solidified him, those killings, and suddenly he was a made guy.
Well,
this is how he rose up.
He went to prison for 4 years. Yeah, and came out a made man. And
That's right. I got confused because I wrote 1997. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. In 1977.
okay,
So
well,
he
he was very ambitious.
Yes, he was. Yes, I should say that.
He wanted to work his way up in the mob.
Oh, well, and also 4 years for murder? How does that happen? And I think, was this the years of the 70s? Because back then in the 70s, you would serve maybe 6 months to 3 years for rape.
It was like that in California too.
Murder or murder and
everything. For a long time they had that indeterminate sentencing, and and then it like went, the pendulum swung completely the opposite way, and then the sentences started to become like very harsh.
Yes.
But anyway, that was the 70s.
Yes. So this is the backstory. This is how he became known. He became a made man. He and these other guys killed these guys that were kidnapping Italian mobsters, basically.
And then the FBI was very frustrated because, nobody will testify.
Oh, yeah.
And they for years, were trying to penetrate this organization, this family. But, people were like they're supposed to be. Mm-hmm. They're tight-lipped. They won't testify. Well,
and so what happened was that the FBI was trying to get Gotti, but also there's the OCTF, which is the Organized Crime Task Force. Mm-hmm. They were also trying to get him. And this complicated things because there were these two entities, or two, I don't know even what you would call them, like battling against each other about
state. It's the state
versus the federal,
yeah.
right? So it's like, who's going to get the glory as opposed to all teaming up together, but
whatever. Which at the end they admit that they could have gotten him a lot sooner.
Yes.
If they would have just worked together. But no, it's very competitive. Like the FBI, the Department of Justice, they wanted to be the ones.
Yes. So the first thing that they did was Gotti hung out at this club called the Bergen Fish Club.
Hunt and Fish Club in Queens. And the OCTF, they managed to get a wire in the club. And that happened 7 months before Castellano was killed. And, they were talking about how they would tail these guys all day long. And that getting this bug in was very, very complicated, just trying to figure out how to do this. And, they go through the story. I won't get into it about like how they did eventually get a guy into the club. And so then Castellano dies and they start going back through their tapes. And they started to discover that there was a lot of, Gotti was talking about Castellano, that he had all these issues with him. He didn't want, that Castellano didn't want the mob to have anything to do with drugs. We saw this too in Goodfellas. This idea of, these gangsters don't like to touch, they don't want you dealing drugs, because dealing drugs, there's really long sentences. And the longer the sentences, the more someone has incentive to flip. Mm-hmm. So he didn't want those drugs, and Gotti thought that was BS. So anyway. Wait. Because Gotti's brother and best friend were drug dealers. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Castellano was basically, talking about how he wanted Gotti out of the picture.
Yes.
And so basically...
And he snubbed him.
He appointed this Tommy Bellotti guy
as the
underboss. And John thought he was next in line. And he basically knew he was going to be killed. So he just strikes first. Oh, and I love this because they heard Castellano talking about, like, well... It's almost Christmas. We'll kill him. Basically, we'll kill him after the holidays. And Gotti is, he was just incensed by that. He's like, a gangster doesn't give a fuck about Christmas. And so he just killed him right before Christmas.
Yes. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, they talk about how then Gotti basically owned the city, every union, every bricklayer. You couldn't pour cement. Everyone had to pay, $100 or $100,000 a day to the Gambino family, and but Gotti was never questioned about Castellano.
Nope.
By the police. But there was this case.
The case in Queens.
The road rage case.
This one, yeah.
What does that have to do with Castellano's murder?
Nothing. Basically, what happened was that Gotti, in 1984, Gotti and this guy, Romval Piek, who was a refrigerator repairman, they got into a fight over a parking space. And Romval had no idea who Gotti was. He obviously would not have taken a stand. But essentially, what happened was that the guy, that Gotti got incensed, and he smacked the guy in front of a bunch of witnesses, and he was arrested right away. So the case happened. That happened in 1984, but they went to court in 1986 for assault in a robbery case against Gotti. But they couldn't find Romval at all.
He had disappeared.
He disappeared, but then they found him in a hospital out in Nassau County, and yes, they found him out there. It was a bit of a mess.
And guess what? He didn't want to testify.
Yeah, he testified and wouldn't point to Gotti.
Right.
He basically was like, no. And so the charges were dropped.
And basically, like, killing witnesses, intimidating witnesses, that was just routine. That was just the cost of doing business.
Well, yeah, and they interview a lot of reporters, and one of the reporters said that, back then in the 80s, this goes back to, like, the feeling of lawlessness and all of that, was that the 80s were pretty grim. A lot of stuff was happening, and that what was great about John Gotti was he was fun to follow. He was fun to talk about. It was and this also in the 80s became the tabloid era, the era of National Enquirer and Star and all these other magazines and People magazine, and plus all of the tabloid news shows that were happening. He was a good story.
I thought the 80s were fun.
Oh, yeah. I don't know. I mean, I'm not quite sure. I thought the 80s were, I don't know. It's hard for me to remember now, but
I think it was grim in terms
of New York, though.
Well, in terms of New York, yeah. But I mean, like, I don't know. To me, God, the 80s just seemed like a fun time where you could just, maybe because I was in high school and college in that time, but life, it was fun if you just didn't pay attention to, like, all the outside stuff. And that's why, when you look at the music of the 80s and all, everything's just, and all this, it's just kind of like, let's just have fun,
Yes.
Like everything was grim, but,
But it was also the part, because Gotti did this really well, was the 80s were very much about opulence, and this was Trump and the gold sinks and Wall Street and making money. And Gotti represented that. It was this idea of a smart businessman.
It's aspirational.
Yes, very aspirational. So at the end of episode 1, we meet this woman, Diane Giacalone. She's an assistant U.S. attorney. And she had a case against Gotti, and she felt like, I have a really good case, and I'm going to get him. And there we go. We're now on to episode 2. And then they tell us a lot of various stories that are hard to, like, okay, now how has this got to do with this? And how has this got to do with this? But basically, this was in September of 1986. It was a RICO case. And Diane was a girl from the neighborhood, and she was determined.
Gotti?
Yes,
okay.
Yes. So basically, she felt like she had a lot of good witnesses, and this was the problem, was that there was one witness, this one a Gotti loyalist named Willie Boy Johnson, and he then became a rat for cooperating with the FBI for years, and so the big thing was, so they were really worried that if Gotti found out that Willie Boy Johnson was testifying, that that he was a rat, so they were debating whether or not, do we include him? Do we not include him? Do we include him in the indictment? And the big thing is Jack Alone in open court admits and talks about this guy in open court in her opening statement about how we have this guy, Willie Boy Johnson, and he's been an informant. And they learn that this guy has been this informant for 15 years. So Willie Boy was currently in the mob with Gotti. He was a loyal friend to Gotti. Gotti thought they were friends. And this whole time for 15 years, this guy, Willie Boy, had been working with the FBI. And she admits this in open court. And it's a bit of a mess.
She didn't do anything. What did she think was going to happen?
Yeah.
She didn't do anything to protect the guy?
Well, and also the FBI was pissed because Willie Boy was their guy that they were surveilling and working with, and he was informing for them, and that blew his cover. So they were mad.
But she was from the DOJ too. I mean, she was part of the...
Yeah. Well, this is the other thing that we find out is even though if you work for the same department, even if you both work for the FBI or Department of Justice, then doesn't necessarily it's all about like who's going to get the glory.
Well, the FBI is the law enforcement component of it. The Department of Justice is the prosecution part of it. So the FBI goes out, they collect evidence, they make a case, they turn it over to the prosecutors in the Department of Justice. This is the Eastern District of New York, and then they're the ones who actually try the case.
Okay, so yeah, I guess
they're working together.
Yeah, but they felt they were mad, but because I don't think they wanted the cover to be blown, which is and also
because they wanted to keep using this guy.
They wanted to keep using this guy, but Jacqueline felt like she needed to talk about him, and again. You kind of look at this woman thinking, well, what did you think was going to happen?
I know. Well, what did happen?
So basically, let's see. We meet. So what happened was that her case had a lot of witnesses. And the problem was that they were all, obviously the witnesses are going to be other mafia guys, quote unquote, like lowlifes. And the problem was that Gotti had this very flamboyant,
his lawyer,
Bruce Cutler.
He was great.
Who, he crucified Jack Alone. He just did everything that he needed to do. He was very big. He apparently, the thing was that he also wanted to be a mobster, apparently.
Clearly.
So he eviscerated all of these witnesses because, I mean, how can you believe you're a liar? You're a lowlife. You're a creep. You're this. And
you're a rat.
You're a rat. Yeah. And let's see. And then this one guy we see, this Matthew Trainer. He was a real problematic witness because originally he was going to testify for Jacques Alone for the DOJ. And then he took everything back and basically said Jack Alone bribed him. And then he eventually later got prosecuted for perjury. But this guy was like, oh, no, I'm not testifying against Gotti either. So Gotti gets acquitted on all charges. And it was the first successful defense of a RICO case.
Wow.
And that's why
That's why he seemed untouchable.
Yeah. And so a lot of people were giving the credit to Cutler, but apparently someone paid one of the jurors $60,000, which in 1986 is a lot of money. So once he beat that rap, he became he was on Time magazine. He was partying with Warhol and David Bowie, rock stars. Yeah. This is when they named him the Dapper Don. And so he had this outside persona as this Dapper Don, but, underneath it all, he was ruthless.
Right. He was a killer.
Yeah.
And somebody made this comment in talking about his persona at some point in the documentary where they said, people loved these $2,000 silk suits that he wore, but they didn't think about how he got the money to buy that suit.
Yes.
Basically killing people.
Well, and so the government said, okay, the FBI said, we need a different tact. We can't keep putting witnesses on. Like, we can't do that. So it goes back to, we've got to get a wire in. We've got to get him, Gotti, saying on tape, and, you know, telling us what he's doing. That is the only way we're ever going to get him. So, of course, then, you know, August 1988, Willie Boy is found dead in his home. So he's gone.
I wonder who did it.
Yeah. So Gotti then sets up quarters in a new place called the Ravenette in Little Italy. And this is where all of the mob families were together. And this was it was hard to get in because it was all very insular. They were all part of that. And they managed to get a camera up that showed everybody coming and going outside of the Ravenette. So you're seeing, so they're able to see, like, this is Gotti, this is his number one, this is number two, these are the people that he's meeting, this is who he's in with, this is where this is. And Gotti actually would have all of his capos and soldiers meet on Wednesday nights there. So they said, like, they were able to get everybody in one place. He said that's what was so different about this too, was that, again, this was a very, very secretive society that now they're gathering everybody in one place at one time. And that's how the FBI was able to start seeing the dynamics of the family. But they needed to get into the Ravenette to actually bug it.
Yeah. So they got a warrant to go in and, bug the Ravenite. I don't know how did they know when there was going to be nobody there?
You know what?
No one was going to walk in on them, or
but they had one guy go in. I thought it was so interesting because I didn't know that there was such a thing as the FBI Special Ops. I was like, ooh, that's kind of a cool job. But basically, they cut the wires. They cut some phone wires. So one of these mobster guys calls up and says our phone, or I don't know how he did.
Oh, that's right. And then they go and pretend to be
a repairman. So one guy goes in and he gets the lay of the land of, like, where can we put this bug, gets the lay of the land. And then after that, they call in their two, like, famous locksmen.
Yeah.
And they do this thing called impressing a key. And it's like you shove it in the door and whatever, when you turn it, like, whatever the lock is. Yeah. Basically, they make a key. It took 3 to 4 hours for him to do it because there was so much foot traffic. And they broke in and they planted bugs. And that, I wrote this down too. They said they were in there for 1 to 2 hours. I'm like, really?
Well, what is this, in the middle of the night?
Yes.
Like when everyone's gone home, I guess?
Yeah. But the problem was that where they planted the bug, they couldn't hear anything. There was a cappuccino machine. There was an ice machine. Everyone was talking at one. Yeah. And
can't hear anything.
So eventually it turns out that they broke in many times and moved the bugs around. But it wasn't working. And so they then go back to the 1986 tapes that the OC, this is a little strange because I didn't understand, because this was one thing that was confusing. It was like back and forth between the OCTF guys and the FBI guys. And it's kind of confusing of, like, well, which entity is now doing this? But let's see.
Well, this is where... Well, I don't know where you were going with that.
Well, no, this is the whole thing about... So they're moving this bug around. At the same time, the OCTF, they are also trying to make a case. So the FBI's got this bug. They're trying to work with their tapes from the Bergen Hunt and Fish Club. And they find a conversation about the labor union leader who went to Bankers and Brokers. Bankers and Brokers is a restaurant owned by the Gambino wise guy, and he used non-union carpenters. And the carpenter union yelled at him because, you need to... said, hey, this is owned by the mob. And it became this whole thing. And basically, the Gambino family went after this guy, John O'Connor, who's the union leader. And so the...
Gotti ordered his murder
hit
because he wouldn't cooperate with, the rules. He wouldn't pay the $100,000 a week or a month or whatever it was that he was supposed to be paying.
Well, and I think he used these non-union guys, which was a big no-no. I will say, this is one thing that's very confusing about these stories, the way in which these guys tell these stories. I'm like, wait, what? You know, they kind of miss details. It's very confusing because like it was confusing about who was it, you know, were you mad because he wasn't going to pay? Were you mad because he used non-union carpenters? Like, it's kind of strange. Like, I don't know.
I think
that was
it
just
was
me.
I think it was all of it.
Yes.
But now I have here, now I thought this happened later because, okay, so now we're talking about the, was it the FBI or was it the organized crime task force that got the bug in the upstairs apartment?
That was the FBI. So we're now at January 1989, and he's arraigned for the O'Connor shooting.
Okay, so wait a minute. So the O'Connor trial, that was a state case. Mm-hmm. So that trial started, but in the meantime, the FBI is still working their case.
Yes.
And they somehow figure out that, because they're listening to their tapes and they realize that there's these long periods of time where nobody's talking. Mm-hmm. And I think they might have also had some kind of surveillance footage. They figure out that basically whenever Gotti and Frank Locascio, who's the underboss, and Sammy Gravano, who's the consigliere, whenever they want to talk about something important, they leave. Mm-hmm. And they go upstairs. There's like this apartment upstairs.
Well, because I think that by then, they don't say this in the documentary, but I'm assuming that Gotti's like, oh, I'm being arraigned because of a conversation that I had in the club.
So they know
I better not talk in this club anymore.
Yeah.
So let's go up, which is a smart thing to do. But then the FBI figures out what they're doing and they manage to get a bug up there.
Yeah, there's some old lady living up there, but she's not always there, and they kept calling her in the middle of the night until she didn't answer.
Yeah, it was, oh my God.
And then, so they sneak in there, they get in there, they break in, they plant their bug, and they can hear everything.
But nothing happens for like 3 days. And so they tickled the wire a little bit.
Right.
They decide to do an America's Most Wanted about Castellano. I don't think I'm saying his name right. And an episode to see if they could get Gotti to talk. And of course, see, they appealed to his ego.
Right.
And so the bug picks up Gotti and Sammy and Frank, talking about the murder.
Yeah, outlining exactly how they killed him. Yeah,
he doesn't admit it, but he outlines it. And then we get into the whole, how do you prove a RICO case?
Yeah, so basically, RICO is the acronym for the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. It was in 1970, it was a federal act, and it was for the purpose of being able to convict people in these organizations like the mob, where people all act separately. They're all doing their own separate things that in and of themselves might not be a crime, but it's a conspiracy. They're all acting together for the common purpose. Mm-hmm. And so you have to prove the existence of a criminal enterprise, proof that the person you're prosecuting is a member of that criminal enterprise, and then you have to have two what they call predicate criminal acts. So you have to commit at least 2 acts in furtherance of this conspiracy.
Yes.
As part of the organization.
So this is what the FBI is working on. In January of 1990, the OCTF case starts. And because it's a state case, it can be televised. Mm-hmm. So this was just like, Gotti was now even more famous. Mm-hmm. And they had Gotti on tape talking about the O'Connor murder. And the thing that was funny in the courtroom, you see everyone's wearing headphones except Gotti. Yeah. Gotti wouldn't listen to it.
Yeah.
He had he wasn't even going to hear it. And so one of the things that Gotti said was, he said these lines, bust him up. and it was part of the section of the tape. And somehow, I think was it Cutler who managed to convince everyone or make them doubt whether or not he was really saying bust them up?
Well, yeah, with semantics, it's like he said bust him up. And so the prosecution is saying, well, that means kill him. And Cutler's like, well, wait a minute. What proof is there that bust him up, means that? It can mean a different thing to a different person. And that's a very good argument. And it worked.
Yes. Well, and at the same time, while the OCTF was working on their case in real time, the FBI is still bugging him, and the FBI picks up that they pick up a few things. They pick up that maybe Gotti starts to get a little worried. He then asks Sammy, if something ever happens to me, you can, I want you to take over. And they also hear, the FBI hears that about jury tampering.
Yeah.
Because basically Gotti's like, well, we got to get someone on the jury.
We got to get some jurors.
And essentially the FBI was supposed to tell the OCTF if they heard anything about the jury tampering. But the FBI, basically we're like, they found some sort of loophole in their own minds, essentially. It was a little
I wouldn't say that they were supposed to tell them.
Well, they had an agreement. I think that was the thing. That from my understanding, the OCTF went to them and said, hey, we all know we're both bugging him. We both know we're trying to get this guy. If you hear of anything with jury tampering, will you say anything to us?
I don't remember that
at
all.
Yeah. I do, because it was kind of a thing between the FBI and the OCTF.
Well, because at the end of the documentary...
Yeah, they all work together, but...
No, but at the end of the documentary, this is specifically brought up, where the guy from the FBI, who was the head of the FBI investigation, he said, yeah, we heard about this, and we basically decided not to tell them. And... he justified it in his mind. Because again, at that point, they were in competition.
Yeah, that's what I just said.
Okay, but wait a minute. But you said that they had some agreement that they were going to exchange information if that ever happened. And I don't think that ever existed, because the guy from the task force, then they cut to him and he said, yeah. He said, I would, if I were in that position, I think I would have told them. But I understand why they didn't tell us.
Well, I think it was being a little more I remember it as that they were a little bit more like, maybe there's not a formal agreement, but I thought it was more of a, hey, if you know anything. I mean, listen, the FBI did not have to turn anything over. The FBI didn't. And in the end, what really helped Gotti's case in the end was what the OCTF recorded. So it's just the sense that I got from the OCTF guys is that they had a lot of feelings about the FBI, and the FBI felt very superior to the OCTF.
Oh, yeah. They didn't like the way the FBI felt like, they were better than them. And also, Gotti was in their jurisdiction, and I think they felt defensive about the fact that here we are in our own jurisdiction in New York, in this, whatever their jurisdiction was Brooklyn or Queens or that area, and they couldn't even get him.
Yeah.
And so then the FBI comes in, and it's like, oh, well, the FBI's got to come in because you guys can't handle this. So, yeah, there was a lot of friction, and they were not working together or helping each other.
But guess what? Gotti found not guilty.
Yeah.
He gets off from the murder.
Oh, and yeah, the paparazzi was there. The people on the streets are all cheering for him. Celebrities. Was this the one where celebrities were there?
Yeah, they have victory parties. There were fireworks.
Yeah.
Fireworks.
And then that reporter, Barbara.
Oh, yeah.
They let her in, and they were drinking Cristal out of paper cups. And then Barbara claims, I doubt this actually happened, but she claims that she made a toast to them and said, remember, gentlemen, loose lips sink ships.
Yeah.
And it's like, no shit, Barbara. You think these people don't know that? You're telling the mob.
And that's how he got the moniker Teflon Don. That nothing sticks to him. But the FBI bug is still up. And what happens is Gotti's ego, it is off the charts. But the other mobsters, they're mad because he is just too public. They feel like, you're egging these guys on, because every single time that he would beat a rap, Gotti, he would became more public and shoved it more in their face and more in their face. And these kind of old school mobsters are like, hello, shh. Why are you drawing attention to yourself? Like, stop drawing attention to yourself. And so they were upset with him. They were mad at him because they felt like the feds are now just desperate to put this guy away. And now you're being looked at even more.
So the FBI, they finally get their case together with all of these
they hit all
tapes. They got all the tapes. And that was the thing. They thought, well, we don't want, you can't cross-examine a tape recording. Tape recording's not going to go sideways. We just want to make this all about the tapes. We want to keep the tapes. So when the trial starts, so they're charged with, they have what they need to charge them. They arrest Gotti, Sammy, and Frankie Lacasio out at the Ravenette. They're all charged with racketeering. And they asked the task force for their tapes. And, they obliged. They finally started working together. And together, the two sets of tapes filled in a lot of gaps. Of stuff that the FBI maybe only had like part of the story or one side of the story. But when they were able to merge the two sets of tapes, they were able to come up with a real comprehensive story to tell. So when the trial starts, they're playing all these tapes. And in one tape, Gotti is complaining about Sammy the Bull Gravato. And he's talking about all these construction entities that he's running. And, he's admitting to killing people. And he's just, he just got him going off.
Well, and one thing that I thought was really interesting, I think one of the reporters pointed this out, was that, the public's image of Gotti was all on the street of like, hi, hello, oh, they didn't get me, whatever. And so these tapes were him swearing.
Very vulgar.
And, very, very vulgar. Every other word is fuck.
Cocksucker.
Yeah. And it's him. And he is, ruthless, aggressive. And I think that also shocked people of like,
wait a minute.
This guy kills people? Well, hold on a second. Like, he does not have he's not the killer with a heart of gold. Like, he's really awful.
Yeah. So Sammy is pissed off because all this time he thinks I'm his consigliere. Like, we're partners. We're in this together. And he's just shit talking him.
And almost like he wanted to kill him.
Yeah. And like if he had to, if one little thing went wrong, he would have no problem killing him. Absolutely. So, Sammy gets nervous. And he realizes that Gotti probably will kill him at some point. And so he contacts the FBI and he says that he wants to cooperate. And I think they said initially they were a little bit hesitant because, it's a human being. He's a mobster.
Yeah.
He's killed people. Like, how are they going to just think? Is the jury going to think that this is credible? And anyway, he did testify, and he detailed like 7 different murders.
Yeah. Well, he's the one that bribed the jury in the first case, the $60,000. Yeah.
Yeah, he just mentioned it all.
Baby.
He told it all. And so it went to the jury. They deliberated for about a day and a half, and Gotti was convicted on all charges. And then they show people like rioting.
Yeah.
They were upset.
People were rioting in the streets.
Yeah.
So mad. And so Gotti, he got life in prison. Sammy got 5 years. Gotti dies in prison in 2002. What happened? Sammy was killed.
No, he's still alive.
Oh, he's still alive? So, isn't it his daughters that are on that Mob Wives show?
Yeah, his daughter, Victoria.
Okay, yeah.
Or no, not Victoria. That's
Gotti's daughter.
I think her name is Karen.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah,
I only
well-
watched a few episodes of that Mob Wives.
Well, the Gravano thing is so interesting because, he testifies, he does his time.
I mean, how is he still alive?
I don't know.
That's the other part.
They put him in the witness protection program, and he stayed for like 8 months. He didn't like it. He didn't like the rules. He said, I'll take my chances.
Yeah.
He moved to Arizona, and then he and his ex-wife and his son and his daughter all got into drug trafficking, and the whole entire family was convicted of drug trafficking. And I think like everyone got probation except for him. This is like in 2002, I think. So he goes back to prison, and he gets released in 2017. And now he has a YouTube channel and a podcast.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe he could be a guest of ours.
It's called Our Thing.
Our Thing.
Our Thing. So I might check that out.
Oh, yeah. Our Thing. Okay.
To see what that's all
Sammy,
about.
are you a fan of Sister Wives, Sammy? Why don't you come and listen to our show? Oh, I guess I got that wrong. This is just a lot of information at once.
Yeah.
It's very easy to get confused by these details when
Yeah.
you're furiously trying to write notes because it was a lot of information.
He also wrote like a big tell-all book too. And, some people are mad at him. They still call him a rat. And whatever. But yeah, Gotti, he died from throat cancer at 62.
Wow. And I remember this because, in 2003, 2004, Victoria Gotti, his daughter, had a reality show.
Oh, yeah. Growing Up Gotti.
Yeah. And it was her with her 3 boys. One of the boys was named John.
One
and,
was like Carmine.
Yeah. And like Michael or something like that. Like these very, and it was it only lasted 1 season, but
it was 3.
It was 3 seasons?
I think so.
Oh my God. I think I only watched a few episodes. Maybe that's how long I lasted. But it was funny because I remember when she went on her tour talking about the show and promoting it. I remember I heard her on Howard Stern, and Howard Stern's like, I'm not going to criticize this show. Great show, Victoria. Love it. Love you. The show. What are you doing? I mean, he was just like, I'm not going to say anything bad about any of these people. I'm keeping my mouth shut. I just thought it was so funny. Like just how, but she was a character because that Victoria, she had super long hair, like really long blonde, like past her butt. Long blonde hair,
like extensions before extensions were in.
Yes, and she was before the New Jersey Housewives.
Yeah.
She was that part perfectly.
Well, she married a big mobster herself.
Oh, she did. Who'd she marry?
His last name is like it's like Lange or Lag. It's like La. Something like that. But anyway, that's the father of her sons.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so she married a gangster.
But the father wasn't really around. I remember in the show because the boys are all grown.
Probably went to prison.
They were all in their 20s, but they all still lived at home. Mm-hmm. And I mean, she had a tremendous amount of money. I don't know if that was from the husband or from dad or what it is, but
I don't know.
That show lasted 3 years. Oh my God. I thought it was like 1 year. It was a one-hit wonder.
Well, and also too, it's kind of interesting. I was reading about John Gotti's childhood. He grew up very, very poor. There was 13 children. His father really could never support the family. Mm-hmm. And, he kind of quit school at 15 or 16 and, started working. And I'm sure the mob stuff was a way to make money.
Yeah.
And he, I think that informed a lot of his, choices. Mm-hmm.
But the question then is, if Gotti had less of an ego, if Gotti had hidden more, would it have all gone down like that? Do you know what I mean? I do wonder, what would have happened if he could have had his ego in check, and these people. What I was really surprised by was that they're bugging you now know that they're bugging your club. Why do you think that they wouldn't figure out how to then bug this apartment? Do you know what I mean? I would just think that he would have more stuff in place to aren't there scanners and stuff to detect bugs?
Yeah.
Wouldn't you talk in code? Wouldn't you not want to talk anywhere near anybody?
Right. Go
like,
outside, go down to the river and
like
talk
get
down
naked
there
or something. And
Yeah.
just so that I was really surprised. I thought he was smarter than that.
Well, I mean, like you said earlier, there's only two ways this ends.
Yeah.
Death or prison. And I just think that the whole nature of being in the mob and all this kind of stuff is that, eventually,
Yeah.
you can do these things to try to protect yourself. But yeah, I think people start to get comfortable. And if you get a little bit too cocky and a little bit too comfortable, then it's going to all come crashing down sooner.
Yeah.
But eventually, and also think about this. The federal government, especially, I mean, the resources they have and the power they have, I mean, they'll get you eventually. Mm-hmm. They really will. I mean, you just can't compete with that. And he couldn't.
Yeah. Well, and also if you think about it, you're committing crimes every single day. The government just needs one
just
conviction.
one.
That's it. You just have to screw up once. And but I understand the lure of the lifestyle and the power, because even when you go to prison, I'm assuming that Gotti still had a tremendous amount of power in prison, or that he could still rule the family from prison. So did you watch The Sopranos?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, yeah, that was the whole thing with The Sopranos. As charming as Tony Soprano was, he was a ruthless killer. He was an awful person. And I think that is this anti-hero, which we have a lot of in on TV. It's hard to wrap your brain around that, because there is something very mysterious and cool and dangerous. But when you really cross a line, you realize, like, these are not people you want to be anywhere near.
No,
at all.
It's not glamorous. It's really not. It's horrible.
Yes.
So,
all right. Well, on that note, so would you give this a thumbs up or thumbs down?
Thumbs up.
It was good.
I liked it.
it too.
It was a lot to absorb in 3 hours. A lot of information, but
and a lot of stories. This is one of the hardest thing about these documentaries. There's so many stories, and you're like, oh, I got to write this down, because I don't know if the story is going to be important again. And then you realize, like, oh, that wasn't important. I didn't need to write that down. So anyway, well, thank you so much for tuning in. We really appreciate it. If you like this podcast, please go to Apple and give us a 5-star review. Can't talk. If you have not already started to subscribe, please subscribe to the podcast. That also helps us out. And check us out on Psych Legal Pop on Instagram and TikTok. We are continuing our Sister Wives coverage on Tuesdays, and we will get back to our Sister Wives Rewind. If you're a big Sister Wives fan, you can go back and listen to our Rewind. We did the first 5 seasons all the way through. But right now we're just focusing on the new season and these documentaries. Anything else?
Nope, I think that's it.
All right. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Howdy, howdy, ho, and welcome to Fantasy Fan Fellas. I'm Hayden, producer of the Fantasy Fangirls podcast and your resident lover of all things Sanderson.
And I'm Steven, your bookish internet goofball, but you can call me the Smash Daddy.
And we are currently deep diving Brandon Sanderson's fantasy epic, Mistborn. But here's the catch. Steven here has not read Mistborn before.
That's right, hey. So each week, you'll get my unfiltered, raw reactions to every single chapter.
And along the way, we'll do character deep dives, magic explainers, and Steven will even try to guess what's next. Spoiler alert, he'll be wrong.
Newsflash, I'm never wrong. Episodes come out every Wednesday, and you can find Fantasy Fan Fellows wherever you get your podcasts.